Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So it is a hot one here in Clatsop County today. We are not used to the heat up here. I mean, we're used to the rain. We can deal with the cold, but we're not used to the heat. And today it was like 88, 90 degrees, something like that. And the humidity is off the charts. Everybody here is just sweating. They're all miserable. It is very muggy out. And sitting in this car right now has me like sweating like a pig. So thought I'd be a trooper, come out here and give you a video anyway. I just got off of work, so I'm about ready to go into the house here. But I've been thinking about some of the things that have been taking place over the last week, and especially when it comes to some of the things that the Federal Reserve is saying and some of the actions coming out of the government. It's pretty obvious now that the economy is really starting to sputter. And you can see it by some of the Fed statements out there saying that Congress needs to pass a stimulus package as soon as possible in order to keep this thing going. And I think Donald Trump pretty much took that to heart last week because he signed those executive orders to try and get some sort of the stimulus package moving through the economy, or at least to try and convince the people that something has taken place here. But yeah, it's obvious that there is some economic sputtering taking place right now. And you go and you look at some of the actions that the Federal Reserve has done lately, like, all these lending facilities that they had set up to try and bridge over the recession, they're not working. They're not working up to the standard that they were hoping that they would do. And like the main one, that Main Street lending facility, this was going to be the lending facility that provided loans to small businesses to keep people employed. I mean, I think that's probably like the biggest concern coming out of the Federal Reserve is the employment, right? And that if unemployment starts to rise, then there is going to be even more demand from the Federal Reserve to do something about that. And they're really limited on what they can do. Before they used to drop interest rates, but now they don't really have the availability to drop interest rates like they have because they have now reached the zero lower bound, meaning that dropping interest rates means that they would have to go negative. So they're relying on the government to provide stimulus into the economy, whether it's, checks from the Treasury or government spending of some sort, or government programs. Somehow they're trying to get the government to try and stimulate this economy, and Congress isn't passing it. So that's why Donald Trump, in a hurry, passed those executive orders to try and keep the economy stimulated, or at least keep the people in the idea that the economy is being stimulated. You also look at, some of the things that they're talking about. Like, if you went back a few years, even 3-4 years ago, and you talked about a central bank digital currency and how the Federal Reserve would someday set up a digital currency, they would have laughed at you. Nobody would have taken you seriously. Nobody would have even considered a central bank digital currency 3-4 years ago. Now, it's like Main Street talk. It is like the talk coming out of the Federal Reserve. And you got the Fed Now program, which is going to be the instant payment program that the Federal Reserve wants to set up, that's going to be using a digital currency to facilitate the trades. It's happening. I mean, there is going to be some sort of central bank digital currency in our futures, and I would imagine that is probably going to happen fairly quickly. And I would think that with as much talk as the Fed has been talking about stimulating the economy with direct payments to the people, that some sort of MMT, like the modern monetary theory, is going to be taking place. I mean, listening to Peter Schiff and Jim Rickards talk about it, the way Peter Schiff actually talked about it made a lot of sense, in that MMT is not new. It's just part of the cycle. And that at some point, the amount of government dole out there that is provided to keep the people mellow is the end game of an economy before it completely crashes. So the Federal Reserve, they know that helicopter money is going to become a regular thing. And trying to run it through the Treasury is not going to be very efficient, getting in, out in paper checks or even on debit cards or direct deposited into our bank accounts. The Fed now is going to be instantaneous, from the Fed directly to the people. And the way the system is set up now, that would pretty much circumvent the fractional reserve banking system that we have, where, you know, the Federal Reserve would typically want to drop interest rates and then get people to borrow money and get that money into the system to start buying the goods and services out there by getting the people to borrow the money to do it. Well, now people are so saturated in debt that the amount that they would have to borrow in order to stimulate the economy is far beyond anything that they are capable of doing. So the Federal Reserve has to stimulate the economy directly with payments to the people, helicopter money. Once this starts to happen, then you're going to really start seeing inflation pick up. You know, Dr. Lacey Hunt, and I wish I had studied a lot more of Dr. Lacey Hunt's stuff, because he is incredibly knowledgeable. And the way he talks about the stage in which we are at right now is that all this stimulus is not going to have the effects on inflation like it would have in the past. And that we have reached too much debt to the amount of gross domestic product that we acquire here in the country in order to have a stimulating effect to it. Basically, the amount that we borrow is not productive. Right? It's not productive enough to produce a profit. And that's the situation that we've really come into now, is that the money that people borrow isn't going to stimulate the economy like it once was. A lot of what the people are borrowing is simply just to survive. And I mean, I'm kind of going off on my own here. This isn't what, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily what Dr. Lacey Hunt is saying, but that's kind of the way I see it, is that the Federal Reserve right now has met an economy that is completely saturated in debt, can no longer take out enough debt in order to stimulate the economy, to keep those jobs going, to keep the economy flowing, keep the money velocity going, that they now have to inject money directly to the people in order to make that thing happen. And yeah, we're going to see some strange times coming up over the next couple of years. Things that people would never have thought taken place in the banking system will soon start taking place. Like the direct deposits, like the helicopter money. You know, we're going to see interest rates the lowest that we have ever seen them. Kind of like what we're seeing in the housing market right now. But what do you see taking place already? What? The fees are starting to rise. So even though the interest rates are low, the cost of the house, the cost of getting the loan is starting to increase. Banks can't make money on low interest rate, right? Banks make money off of acquiring an interest. But if the interest rates are so low that it's no longer profitable to them, how do they make a profit? With fees. They start charging you exorbitant fees or higher fees in order to get those loans. And that's what we're going to start seeing, is that, yeah, you might be able to have a cheap loan, a cheap mortgage out there, but the cost of getting it is far beyond what your capabilities are. You know, all these efforts at the Federal Reserve, they talked about the Federal Reserve creating inequality. Well, yeah, no kidding. You know, you create a situation in which you can borrow a bunch of money really cheap and inject that into the stock market and the real estate market and the bond market, and all these asset prices start to bubble, and the only people who own it are just a handful segment of the population, then yeah, you're going to create a huge wealth inequality. Right? And they say that their actions didn't do it. Well, no, your actions didn't cause an inequality. Your actions caused the people who have to be able to acquire more, right? And the people who don't have are still stuck down at the bottom, not able to acquire any more of it. So it's not like, hey, we got this idea, we're going to create this wealth inequality with our actions. No, it's just that what you did created a wealth inequality that allowed the people who have to have more and the people who have not to be stuck where they're at. So I think about it, it's just like, if the Federal Reserve is mandated to deal with this inequality, which I don't agree with. I mean, anytime you ever draw a circle around something, like you take a segment of the population, you draw a circle around it and you give it a particular, that's segregation. Okay? Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, that's what it is. And so if the Federal Reserve really wanted to deal with the inequality, then they would stop dropping interest rates like they have, because that's the reason why we have such big inequality. Is because it's provided the ability for people who are rich to become even richer off their stocks, bonds, and real estate, and the people who are at the bottom to have even a harder time to try and acquire into that position. Anyway, it's too hot in this car to keep going. Uneducated economist, you guys let me know.